Peace and blessings minus the stressings. May you walk in the divine path for which you are destined. It's your brother and business king Rob back at you once again with another vid. And man, we have another celebrity coming out with a little bit of praise for Hitler. And it's something that I feel like we got to talk about. So let's get into it. So USC fighter Bryce Mitchell was on the Arkansanity podcast where he made some controversial remarks. And if you're anybody that says anything about Hitler in a seemingly good light, then those remarks are going to be deemed controversial by the world, especially by the Jewish community who historically suffered at the hands of Hitler. The featherweight fighter caused a social media uproar after he praised Adolf Hitler by calling the Nazi leader a good guy. The 30-year-old, who is ranked 13th in the featherweight division, was on the Arkansanity podcast where he made those controversial remarks, stating that Hitler only wanted to purify his country. He's quoted to say that I honestly think that Hitler was a good guy based on my own research, not my public education indoctrination. I do really think before Hitler got on meth, he was a guy to go fishing with, the American fighter said. He's also quoted to say that he fought for his country and he wanted to purify it by kicking the greedy Jews out that were destroying his country and turning them all into gays, he added. Quoting to say that they were gaying out the kids, they were queering out the women, they were queering out the dudes. Do you know where the first tranny surgery ever was? Happened to be in Germany before Hitler took over, in quotes. So there's a lot of layers here that is very problematic when you're speaking about this subject. And it's a lot of societal things that really should be taken a look at, but it won't happen objectively, especially in public, because of the nature of the conversation and because of the feelings and those nerves that are still exposed and open because of the tragedy that took place then. In my last video where I discuss Hitler and Kanye's approach, um, it seems to be that the overwhelming majority of people who praise Hitler or have positive things to say about him are looking at the state of Germany prior to him taking control of the country versus the financial and societal effect that he had after he took over. And that blended with some of the horrific things that have been taught to us down through the years about what happened to the Jewish community in that country versus the turnaround and reform of the country. That's problematic right there. Because in many ways, the country itself benefited from his leadership, but in atrocious ways where, a whole sect of people were just totally demolished, downtrodden, and essentially eradicated. So it's a real, layered situation. And even the words that Mitchell used as far as this educational indoctrination leads to believe that he believes we as a society in America have been taught something that apparently he's alluding to isn't the truth, or at least 100% true, which we've all heard before. There have been people to go out on limbs saying that the Holocaust wasn't real, that the number of Jews killed was not 6 million, all these different things. And I'm here to be as objective as possible because I see how reactions are when you speak on this topic. I definitely know how the reaction will be if you speak positively about Hitler's effect. And I believe that there is no separation that can actually occur between what he did for his home country versus what he did to those people being the Jews. So it is a very, very murky and just a horrible subject to even try to cover, but I believe it's necessary because objectively, when you're looking at this and when you're looking at something like nationalism or just having pride for your country and wanting the best for your people, it should never come at the expense of other people in the sense where they're tortured, persecuted, and killed off. So, was this specifically Jewish hate, jealousy? Was this nationalism and purification of the ugliest degree? Have we been misled by the information passed down to us over the years? Even though we've gotten firsthand accounts of survivors of that time period, I myself have been to the Holocaust Museum, both as a child and as an adult, seen horrific images and keepsakes from that time period. It's all such a murky and unclear situation because is it wrong for a country if they feel a certain group of people are having a negative effect on the growth of the country and the members of the country? Is it wrong for them to want to be segregated from them? Is integration an absolute human right and essential? All of these questions, all of these things that, even in the black community, we have been victims of certain things. And is it because we were forced to try to integrate together with other people that we don't share common interests with? It got me to thinking, how many times have the Jews been subjected to this type of situation? How many times have they been exiled from a region, from a country? And it led me to go take a look at it. And what I find is kind of disturbing, very disturbing, and how they have been scapegoated over the years. So let's take a look. Historically, Jewish communities have faced expulsion from numerous countries, cities, and regions over centuries due to religious, social, and political discrimination. The exact number varies depending on criteria and sources, but estimates suggest that Jews have been exiled or expelled from over 80 locations globally throughout history, which to me is crazy. Everybody talks about the slave trade, especially the African and um, what is it, Portuguese slave trade, where dark skinned black people, Africans, they were targeted, and you kind of get that one location. It's Africa. They took them from Africa, or African leaders sold them, or however the story goes, and it's Africa to America. But to be expelled or exiled from over 80 locations has to be such a horrific type of experience to carry through, your DNA as the generations continue to pass on. So, some notable examples of these expulsions in ancient times, you're thinking the Babylonian exile, which is dated at 586 BCE, the Roman expulsion following the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, and the Bar Kokhba revolt 132 to 135 CE. You're thinking medieval Europe, England 1290 by King Edward I, France, which was multiple expulsions between the 12th and 14th centuries, Spain 1492 via the Alhambra decree, Portugal again in 1496, various German states and Italian regions during the Middle Ages. If you're thinking modern period, you're thinking Eastern European pogroms in the Russian Empire between the 19th and 20th centuries, Nazi driven expulsions and exterminations during the Holocaust. That extermination word is just wow. And Middle East and North Africa, large scale Jewish exoduses from Arab countries post 1948, like Iraq, Egypt, Yemen, and Libya, following the establishment of Israel. So this history highlights systemic persecution, but it also underscores Jewish resilience and adaptability as many communities rebuilt in more tolerant environments over time. The reasons behind these exiles often involved economic jealousy, religious intolerance, and scapegoating during times of political or social unrest. So, the one thing that I do want to take from them as a persecuted race and culture is that the resilience and ability to adapt and thrive within, unfamiliar or, unhealthy surroundings is not only to be applauded, but to be studied and to have a model built after, and not to complain to whoever is listening about whatever's going on, but to figure it out and keep it moving, because such is the nature of life. Every organism and species has had to face threats of extinction to some degree, and the strong survive, as they say. So, it's a testament to that group of people, and we're gonna dissect some of the various sects of Jewish people. There's different sectors, not all just one totalitarian um, style of Jewish people, or there's plenty of different ones, but overall, it looks like they're doing pretty good despite all the odds that they faced historically. So, economic jealousy often played a significant role in the historical expulsions of Jewish communities. They were frequently placed in specific economic roles due to restrictions on land ownership or guild membership and participation in trades or professions. So, over time, this led to resentment from other groups, especially as Jewish communities became prominent in certain industries such as finance, trade, money lending, etc. So, I'll go over some key examples of how economic jealousy factored into some of these exiles. So, money lending and banking. In medieval Europe, Christian doctrine forbade usury, basically charging interest on loans. But Jewish communities were often permitted or forced into the role. And we all have read, in the Bible about the tax man. And the tax man has always been a hated person, obviously. So a lot of times somebody can create a policy and hide behind who they choose and appoint to go out there and enforce the policy. So that is definitely not out of the realm of common sense. As money lenders, Jews sometimes became indispensable to rulers and nobles who needed loans for wars or infrastructure projects. It seems they got into a similar position as the Knights Templar, which there's plenty of videos and information out about their plight and how, they ended up in the situation that they ended up in because they became so powerful, rich, and because so many kings and kingdoms were in debt to them. So I understand how that can happen. While rulers depended on Jewish financiers, the debts they owed could cause resentment, obviously. Elites and commoners alike often used the Jewish community as scapegoats, accusing them of exploiting Christian borrowers, which, right or wrong, or whether true or false, not to be said, really is just kind of what the deal was. Example, in England, economic resentment culminated in widespread anti Jewish riots and ultimately led to their expulsion in 1290. Debts owed to Jewish lenders were often canceled upon expulsion. So that's part of the game right there. If you're a king, you need that money to go to war with or for whatever. Borrow it from the Jews who are in a financial situation to do it because of whatever taxation or whatever situation it is. And then you can also lead your citizens as the nobility, royalty, or leadership into understanding that it's their fault, they being the Jews, that we're in this financial situation and that they're getting taxed so heavily because we owe them. So that resentment might lead your citizens to revolt, riot, protest, and so you don't have to pay that back. You being the nobility, king, whatever leadership, you say, yeah, you're right. It is their fault. And then you expel them out of your country. You kill them. You persecute them. You torture them. Do all kind of heinous acts. So it's really, an evil plan, which it always is an evil plan. And I understand how that could come across coming from, the leadership, easy scapegoating situation. And then, yeah, if you kick a people out of your country, there ain't no way in hell you paying them back. So cold world. If you think trade and commerce, Jewish merchants were central to international and regional trade networks. Their connections, literacy, skills, all of that made them successful intermediaries in trade during the Middle Ages. That success always is going to breed resentment, especially among local competitors who felt threatened by Jewish prosperity or influence in trade markets. The example with that is in France. Expulsions in the 12th to 14th centuries were partially driven by economic envy, as the Jewish merchants were seen as rivals by local guilds and traders. If we move to landlordism and tax collection, the Jews were sometimes appointed by monarchs as tax collectors, as mentioned earlier on, or estate managers because they were outside of the feudal system and dependent on royal protection. Their jealousy comes in where tax collection will make the Jews highly visible targets for resentment. As we said before, nobody loves the tax man. You know what I'm saying? They were seen as agents of oppressive rulers, even though they often had little personal wealth. And whether that's true or not, because not all of them had little personal wealth, but still, in all, you are executing a role that to the common man is going to be seen as the face of the oppression. They might not see the actual king or royalty as the oppressor. They know they might be, they know they are really, but I want to, my rage and resentment is going to go to the tangible face that I see, the one that's coming knocking on my door asking for that tax, or who's sending me that letter. Example, in Spain leading up to the expulsion of 1492, Jewish communities faced hostility for their involvement in managing royal finances and collecting taxes for the crown. Their general prosperity. Jewish communities often emphasize education, community cohesion, and resourcefulness, enabling them to thrive even in restrictive conditions. Salute to them for that. Everybody needs to do that. And I believe the majority of cultures focus on that no matter if they're displaced or going through whatever they're going through. I've seen it with my own eyes. And, the black community always says, hey, we need to follow that example. For some reason, we haven't been able to do it on a grand scale here in America with a truly cohesive movement. And I believe stories like this and situations like this are vital for us to study and figure out a way to come together even more than we already have. Um, the jealousy of the Jewish economic success fueled conspiracy theories that Jews were hoarding wealth or controlling markets. These myths were exploited by rulers or religious leaders to justify the expulsion. So even if there's truth in the myth, or an element of truth, they're gonna exasperate it. They being the people who don't want to pay them back and want to expel them out of their land because hey, that's the way it goes. If you look in Germany during the 14th century, Jews were accused of poisoning wells during the Black Death, a claim partially fueled by jealousy over their perceived economic stability. And, hell, it might have been a situation where somebody did something that was exasperated into, hey, they're doing this. One person one person's actions can be spread to the whole if, the need for the whole to be ostracized is big enough. So, not to say that nobody did poison a well or did something bad, but it wasn't their whole, you know, a secret um, plan for all of us to poison all these. Well, I don't believe that. Did one or two people or a small group of people probably do some bullshit? Probably, you know. Um, and then the redistribution of wealth. Rulers often expel Jews to seize their assets or cancel debts owed to them. Expulsions were financially convenient for monarchs who sought short term economic gain or to pacify their subjects, the same subjects who were the beneficiaries of the burdens that the monarchs put in place in the first place and commissioned the Jews to carry out. So, ain't nobody everybody's guilty to a certain degree in all of these situations. Everybody's hands are dirty. Back to the Spain 1492 example, the Alhambra decree forced Jews to convert, leave, or face execution, and their wealth, land, and businesses were confiscated or sold at low prices to Christians. All a big game, man. The world been a game, ever since money and the influence that it could wield, the power that comes from it, everything's a game, man. So economic jealousy fueled a vicious cycle. Jewish communities were pushed into niche economic roles, achieved prominence, and then faced backlash from envious competitors and indebted elites. So kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. This resentment, coupled with religious and political factors, often culminated in persecution and expulsion. These patterns reveal how systemic inequality and scapegoating can lead to widespread injustice. So Bryce Mitchell, he made his controversial statements. And historically, a few public figures have made similar anti-Semitic comments or expressed admiration for Hitler. You look at Mel Gibson, he is, yeah. In 2006, he made some anti-Semitic remarks during a DUI arrest, claiming that Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. He later apologized for his comments, but he, went through a long period of time of alcohol abuse and some racial comments against Jews and blacks, John Galliano, in 2011, fashion designer John Galliano was recorded making anti-Semitic statements in a Paris bar, including professing love for Hitler. I don't know why you would be getting recorded when having a private conversation. I do believe that as an individual, you should have the right to have whatever feelings you have. So that's kind of fucked up. But, it's a game. Everything's a game, and catching somebody saying the wrong thing, that's a leverage that you now have against them. So it is what it is. That led to his dismissal from Dior and legal consequences. So might want to check out who benefited in that situation. And then Kanye West, of course, in 2022, he made a series of anti-Semitic comments, but it was his admiration, expressing his admiration for Hitler during the interview where he had the mask on. That was kind of the most baffling to me. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? These statements resulted in widespread backlash and the loss of several business partnerships, but he has bounced back from that. But it was just baffling as to why he would have love for Hitler. Why do you say these things? So either y'all know something that we don't know, or y'all have the same type of weird purification, elite society, one race type of views that this dude had. You know what I'm saying? Or we've just been taught all the wrong shit, and homeboy was really doing something to try to help his people. It gets murky. You know what I'm saying? The morality of it isn't murky. That's never murky. You know what I'm saying? The morality of it is very clear. The reasoning behind us being taught what we've been taught, that gets murky. You see what I'm saying? So objectively speaking, it's not hard to have a moral stance on persecuting and killing people and all. It's not hard at all. I'm against all that. Have we been told the correct things over the years? Is there a benefit from leading the country into believing certain things? We hear it all the time. That each country has their own different version of historical events, geared towards rearing their children to believe a certain way. And it's normally for the nationalism. It's normally to, that's not such a hard concept to digest. So the question is have we been told the right thing? Is there lies sprinkled in, or is it all a sham? So there's common stereotypes about Jewish people that are developed over centuries, They often are rooted in ignorance, fear, and prejudice. Stereotypes do are used to justify discrimination, persecution, and violence against Jewish communities. And excuse me, I'll go over a couple of them right now. And I want to say that there's never a comparison in persecution. There's never a comparison in trauma. There's never oh, I went through this more than you. Like there's never that. We've all been through stuff, no matter what race you are. If you're in a certain class, you've been through probably more than the person that's in a class above you, as far as, what this world has to offer, the evils, So this isn't that. This is just an outlook that is asking, are we allowed to have our own individual feelings about something or someone, and it might be against the grain, or it might be against what we historically have been taught, as the Bryce Mitchell dude said, educational indoctrination. Have we been given the clear and honest historical account of what's gone on? Like there's so many questions to be had dealing with this. Are the Jewish communities that are under fire and get stereotypically um, attributed all of these characteristics, do they have some hand in it? Is there an accountability there, or have they been targeted? And like it's so many questions, and it's not a conversation you can really have with anybody. It's not a fruitful conversation that you can have with anybody. It's going to end up in some type of backlash. You're going to suffer if you're a celebrity or a business. It's just a real murky type of situation. Financial control, the stereotype with that is Jews are often depicted as wealthy, controlling banks or dominating global finance. I think that's where your Mel Gibsons and those particular conspiracy theories come in. During medieval Europe, Jews were barred from owning land or joining many professions, and were often restricted to money lending, which Christians were forbidden to practice under church law. The niche role became the basis for myths of Jewish financial influence. You can't be mad if that's the case and they just excelled at what they were made to do. You hear people all the time talking about the food of the black slaves and how they turned, the stuff that was thrown out by the slave masters and made that, great shit. People talk about chitlins and all that, which I never have eaten, and I pray to God I never would have to. But these are the pig intestines and the things that were thrown out that the slaves, managed to turn into some cuisine that even the slave masters was like, oh shit, that's amazing. Like you can't be mad at somebody if you made them do a certain thing and then they become excellent at it. Like it's just ass backwards, like um the impact, of that, the stereotype fuel conspiracy theories, such as the fabricated protocols of the Elders of Zion, which falsely claims Jews control world governments and economies. I don't know. It's above my pay grade, bro. Stereotype of Jews being cunning or manipulative or deceitful or overly shrewd in business and politics. That idea dates back to antiquity, where minority groups were often scapegoated as threats. In the Middle Ages, it was reinforced through caricatures and stories such as Shakespeare's Shylock and The Merchant of Venice. It's been used to justify exclusion from societal and political power structures. I don't even know if that exists, because from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like they hurting. You know what I'm saying? We're talking historically, but today it doesn't seem like they hurting. So I don't know how much of this actually is applicable. This is just me viewing this, as a person. Like I don't know. They have the stereotype of being more loyal to their community, Israel, or global Jewish interests to their home countries wherever they're located. Once again, I don't know if that's a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've worked with Hispanic people all my life that worked over here and sent money back to their home country, whether it be Mexico or any other Latin country. And I don't see anything wrong with that. You're paying taxes here. You're not doing anything to anybody. You're supplementing the economy. You're doing jobs that often citizens here don't want, turn their nose up at. Like, I think this is such a, like, everybody has this idea of how they can speak about people when they won't even do what these people will do, and and sometimes are quote unquote worse morally than the people they talking about. You know, that's why I say this is a murky thing. Once again, it's not a morality uh, thing that I'm having trouble with. Fuck no. No, it's the information. It's the the whys behind what's been done. Like, you can't be mad at them if they got made to do something and they became great at it. You can't be mad at them because their homeland of Israel, they have support and love for, or whatever. Like, it's just, but in the Bible it said, pray for the Middle East, and there will be wars and rumors of wars. So it kind of points to us being in those last days that were mentioned in the text. People even talked about their physical features, which is it's not strange to any of us. But the stereotype Jews are often stereotyped as having distinct physical traits, such as a large nose or other exaggerated features. I mean, same thing with black people. Hell, white people got thin lips. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is what it is. But these depictions were popularized in medieval and later anti-Semitic propaganda, such as the Nazi caricatures that aim to dehumanize Jews. And these portrayals have contributed to the objectification and dehumanization of Jewish individuals. But it's happened, with every oppressed race. It seems like there's a certain playbook, to oppress a race and to, dehumanize people. So, um, the stereotype of the disloyalty thing, going back to that, was often promoted by governments to justify exclusion or expulsion. And that goes back to the Dreyfus affair in France between 1894 and 1906. So it led to accusations of espionage and conspiracy and the exclusion of Jews from military, political, or public service roles. Just classic racism, man, and classic creating a problem and offering the solution, if you will. And then the religious exclusivity. Jews are often accused of being clannish or insular or unwilling to assimilate into broader society, which, honestly, in my opinion, is they're right, man. Like, who's like, the judgment is crazy, because it's every culture's right to have their culture. That's what culture is. I don't gotta. That's the thing with the assimilation and the integrations and all of that, man. Like, why every culture and creed and whatever, it's unique, man. You don't see ants integrating with beetles. You know what I'm saying? Ants got their anthill over here, and beetles dig and live wherever the fuck they live at, man. It's wild. um it really stems from the unique culture and religious practices that Jews have preserved over centuries, which often made them distinct within predominantly Christian or Muslim societies. So it's fueled xenophobia and accusations that Jews view themselves as superior to others, which, if they do, I honestly don't give a fuck. Me. You can view yourself as superhuman. Like, cool. You can view yourself as, whatever. It doesn't matter to me as long as I can get a fair shake in society. But it does matter if you can control elements that, you can push a button and change everybody else's life, or influence, how everybody else can get a fair shake. So that's the tricky part right there. And unfortunately, historically, they've been looked at as the ones that, can push certain buttons and influence certain things, whether in finance or entertainment or whatever, and that they control. So a lot of these stereotypes come from modernized practices and people's views on, especially like when you're thinking in entertainment, the music industry, and you're thinking of black artists with Jewish record label owners, and some of the disparity in the roles there, and some of the practices that have been deemed unfair and just downright malicious. So it's like, once again, I ask, is there a certain accountability that needs to be had? Is this a culture that has risen from being commissioned to only do one thing and excelled at it so well that now they flipped that and made that an oppressive act that they execute and are known for? Like, is this a circle of life type of thing? And if that's the case, then it's the motherfuckers who did it to them in the first place's fault. It's the abuser becoming the abused becoming the abuser. And I think that's as best as I can sum it up. And then, as I look at the cultural influence and the greed elements, cultural influence, Jews are believed to have outsized influence in industries like Hollywood, media, and entertainment. And, the Jewish immigrants in the early 20th century became pioneers in the entertainment industry, and partially because, once again, they were excluded from many other professions. So while some of the contributions to these fields are undeniable, the stereotype has been weaponized to spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jewish control or culture. So I think, you see where I'm going with this. Like, if you're going to marginalize me to something and then I become great at it, and then I either choose to operate within it, or I find all of the little, leeway I can find in it, and then I abuse others with it. Which one is happening? Is it a mix of both? Who's really to blame? And does it go back to why certain people, maybe in latter generations, when these Jewish people have mastered what they've been marginalized into doing, and younger generations only know them for being the masters of that? Does that hate erupt from that because they are seeing them being masters of something that seems oppressive in its own right, and you want them out of your space? You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to excuse any type of physical harm and financial or mental harm. But I'm also trying to get to some type of concrete platform where a discussion can be had without it being hateful, and with it being as objective as possible. Now, I do know that some blame needs to go somewhere, but do we need to go further back into the people that marginalized them? Do we need to look at the original abuser and look at how maybe the abused becomes the abuser, So while some of, their contribution to the some of their contributions to the entertainment industry are undeniable, the stereotype has been weaponized again to spread those anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jewish control of culture. And we as Black entertainers have been some of the biggest recipients of that, So the Jews are often falsely characterized as greedy or obsessed with money. And then there are some that lean into that stereotype. And, they build off of it because they can exercise practices to make sure that they retain wealth and pass it down generationally. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Once again, as long as it doesn't come at the expense of somebody else to the point where they are oppressed and, tortured, whether it be physically, financially, mentally, emotionally, and, I know for every winner, there has to be a loser, but sheesh, man, I don't know. So, the stereotype was tied to economic roles historically assigned to them, once again, such as the money lending. Religious misunderstandings, such as the belief that Jews profited from Jesus' crucifixion, has also played a role and has led to the vilification and exploitation, with Jews being targeted during economic crises. Once again, a scapegoat, more than likely for, a larger organization at play, but you never know. Are they the leaders of said organization? Or have they integrated into it? Was it their plan all along? They've been stereotyped as the Christ killers. Jews have historically been accused of killing Jesus Christ. Deicide, I believe, is the term for that. And that myth originates from certain Christian theological interpretations, despite the fact that Jesus was Jewish and his crucifixion was a Roman act. That's always confused me, but it is what it is. But yeah, it fueled centuries of persecution, including pogroms and the Inquisition. So, and I mean, if you believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, who allowed himself to go ahead and suffer that fate of crucifixion, death, and rebirth for the forgiveness of our sins and his blood, all the whole narrative that happens, he died for our sins, bled on the cross for our future sins, then yeah, that goes into a whole different macro type of plan, spiritual plan that no human Jew could orchestrate, or no human sect of individuals could orchestrate. It was all planned, to happen way before any of these people, you know, could could say that, yeah, this is what's going to happen. So, there's been plenty of stereotypes that have been perpetrated through propaganda, media, political rhetoric, often serving for justifications for anti-Semitism and violence. And, we have to challenge and dismantle harmful beliefs through education, awareness, and dialogue to obviously promote understanding and inclusivity. But that's not just with Jewish people, that's what humanity as a whole. And I swear we've got a long way to go to do that. But there's a lot of puppet masters pulling the strings and distorting things to make us feel a certain way. So I did want to get into the wide range of cultural, religious, and ethnic backgrounds of Judaism. And I want to look at the major categories of Jews defined by religious practices, cultural traditions, and geographic origins. So, by religious denominations, modern Judaism is divided into several religious movements based on varying interpretations of Jewish law, halakha, and tradition. You got Orthodox Judaism, which is strict adherence to halakha, viewing it as divinely given and unchangeable. And those subgroups include modern Orthodox, which combine traditional observance with engagement in secular society. You've got Haredi, and forgive me if I mispronounce anything, it's not to be disrespectful or uh, purposefully unlearned. It's just, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm sorry. But Haredi, the ultra Orthodox, more insular, emphasizing traditional study and dress. And then you have Hasidic Jews, somewhat of a mystical subgroup within Haredi Judaism, focusing on joy, spirituality, and charismatic leadership. You've got Reform Judaism, which their beliefs emphasizes individual autonomy and modern interpretation of Jewish traditions, and less strict observance of halakha. And their practices, services in local languages, mixed gender seating, and often more progressive stances on social issues. You've got Conservative Judaism, the beliefs, a middle ground between Orthodox and Reform, seeking to conserve tradition while allowing for modern interpretations of halakha. And their practices retains more traditional rituals than Reform, but with some adaptations. You've got Reconstructionist Judaism, and their beliefs views Judaism as an evolving civilization, focusing on culture and community rather than divine commandments. And they are often secular leaning, but includes rituals for cultural continuity. And then you've got secular non-religious Jews, identify as Jewish ethnically or culturally, but do not practice religion. And they celebrate cultural traditions such as Passover or Hanukkah without religious aspects. So with all of those divisions just by the religious denominations, it is easy to see how one sect of the Jewish community can perform some actions and it be attributed to the whole, it can be easy to see how, because there's such a diverse um, pie, if you will, and breakdown of the Judaism, like, yeah, it could be some bad apples that have done some fucked up shit over time that, can be attributed to the whole, and can cause them to get, exiled from 80 different regions historically. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't mean all of Jewish people even know what the hell's going on. And just because they have skill at, retaining wealth and taking care of families and building generational wealth, you can't be persecuted for that, just like you can't be persecuted for being in an oppressed situation and struggling to try to, get your community back on track. It's just, you damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know what I'm saying? Geographic and cultural origins, they are, obviously a blend of them as well. And we'll try to run through them really quickly. Jewish communities have adapted to the cultures and environments where they lived, leading to distinct ethnical and cultural identities. So you've got the Ashkenazi, their origins Central and Eastern Europe. I think they might be some of the most focused on when you come to, just kind of the modern viewpoint. I think you're looking at these European Jews. They historically spoke Yiddish, which come to find out for me is a blend of Hebrew, German, and Slavic languages. That's a wild blend, but I guess it can point to, the displacement of them over the decades, and how that comes together. Traditions are heavily influenced by European culture, and they are the largest Jewish population in the U.S. and many Western countries, which gives us our viewpoint of Jews overall because that's who we see the majority of. Next, you have Sephardic Jews. Their origins are Spain, Portugal, and later North Africa and the Middle East after the 1492 expulsion from Spain. They historically spoke Ladino, a Judeo Spanish language, and their traditions are distinct customs, music, and cuisine influenced by Iberian and Mediterranean cultures. That actually sounds pretty cool. I think I can relate to that a little bit. I bet you they've got some cute ladies over there. Mizrahi Jews, I'm sorry, Mizrahi. Origins are Middle Eastern and North African, such as Iraq, Iran, Yemen, and Morocco. Languages are Judeo-Arabic, Judeo-Persian, and other local dialects. And their traditions often overlap with Sephardic practices, but include unique cultural elements from their regions. Makes sense. And you got Ethiopian Jews, origins Ethiopia. They retain ancient biblical traditions and practices, some distinct from mainstream Judaism, and many have immigrated to Israel. And for me personally, those were often the Jews that I wanted to know about the most. Anything Ethiopian seems closer to the origins of Christianity, and it seems like it's a nexus of a lot of historical data and when the world kind of made a shift when it comes to Christianity. I think a lot of the information is right there. Bukharan Jews, origin Central Asia, particular Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Their language, Bukhari, a dialect of Judeo-Persian. Traditions are a blend of Persian, Sephardic, and local Central Asian customs. And then you've got Kafing Jews, and their origins, China, particularly the city of Kafing, and they're a small Jewish community influenced by Chinese culture with limited connection to global Jewish practices. Also, super interesting to me, because the adaptation of where you at regionally influences, you. So, you have a core, but you also can adapt to and assimilate into where you are. And I think that's very interesting. So, philosophical or cultural identities, and you can see as I'm going through this, the we've done the denomination, the religious denomination breakdown. We've done the geographic and cultural origin breakdown, and now we'll go into the philosophical or cultural identity. So there's so many pieces of the Jewish pie, if you will. Zionist Jews, which I believe get the most conspiratorial attention. Their beliefs advocate for the Jewish right to self determination, specifically through the establishment and support of the state of Israel. And I think that's where the majority of conflict comes from, just period, is the Zionist piece of the pie. You often hear Zionists in a very, very negative light. And I think the majority of the negative connotation for Jewish people come from the Zionist Jews and mixed with the Ashkenazi Jews. I think, I don't know if they mix or they're the same, but that's where I've heard the most negative feedback or rhetoric around. So we'll move to the Messianic Jews who believe in Jesus as the Messiah. They are not recognized as Jewish by mainstream Jewish denominations due to their Christian theology, which is super interesting to me. And, I think that's where a lot of the Black Judaism or the original Jews, as they say, because that's a whole nother conversation. But I think a lot of Black people relate to them. And you've got the Karaite Jews, and they reject the oral Torah, the Talmud, and only follow the written Torah. And they are a small minority group. And then you've got the crypto Jews. And I thought that meant that they were New Age investors, but no, it's Anuism, and they're descendants of Jews who were forced to convert to Christianity during the Spanish Inquisition, but secretly maintain some Jewish practices. Which, stuff like that I can salute, man. Yeah, okay, I got to do what I got to do so I don't get killed, but I'm still holding down what I've been taught, over the years historically. So this world is wild, man. Like to be made to just do something or die, it's the wildest stuff, man. And then we have emerging or mixed identities. You've got interfaith Jews, people with one Jewish parent or mixed religious backgrounds who identify partly or fully as Jewish. You've got Jews of color, which Jews from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, including African American, Latina, Asian, indigenous communities. Then you've got the LGBTQ plus Jews that, embrace diverse gender identities and sexual orientations, often affiliated with, progressive movements. So Jewish identity is multifaceted, obviously, encompassing religious, ethnic, and cultural dimensions. Despite differences, most Jewish communities share core traditions such as the Shabbat, the Sabbath, a connection to Israel, and celebrations of the Jewish calendar. So the diverse expressions of Jewish identity reflect the adaptability, once again, and resilience of Judaism across centuries and continents. So historically, they've had a hell of a run, man. They've had to endure a lot, and Judaism has gotten so large that it would be tough for it to be a singular, monolithic practice. You've got just too many pieces of the pie. The oldest sect of Jews is the ancient Israelites, who were the original practitioners of early Judaism. Their religious practices and beliefs were centered on the worship of one God, Yahweh, and they followed the laws and traditions detailed in the Torah, which is the foundational text of Judaism. The ancient Israelite religion began to form as early as the late Bronze Age, around 1200 BCE, and developed further during the Iron Age. between 1000 to 586 BCE. These ancient Israelites lived in the region historically referred to as Canaan, which corresponds to modern day Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and parts of Syria. And doing this video, I'm getting back to the Bible. Going to go back and study some scripture and try to piece a little bit of this together, because as an adult, I believe I can process it a little bit more clearly, especially in relation to what's happening today. So I'm interested in doing a little bit more research on that. Real quickly, I want to touch on the evolution of the sects of Jews. By the late Second Temple period, basically 530 BCE to 70 CE, Judaism had diversified into several distinct sects. And these included the Sadducees, who were priestly aristocrats who adhered to the Torah and rejected the oral traditions and beliefs in a resurrection or an afterlife. They were based in Jerusalem and were closely associated with the temple. And the Pharisees, who advocated for the oral law, later codified in the Talmud, and believed in the afterlife and resurrection, and laid the groundwork for rabbinic Judaism. And they were active throughout Judea and in rural communities. And ironically, both had issues with Jesus, or Yeshua, however you want to pronounce it. Ironically, both had issues with him. So that's kind of wild. Doesn't help the case for people who say that, the Jews were the reason for him getting killed. But, you can't kill the Son of God if the Son of God has already got a plan for it. It's wild to me. The Essenes, which were a group focused on ritual purity and communal living. Some scholars associate them with the Dead Sea Scrolls. They lived in isolated communities such as Qumran near the Dead Sea. Definitely the most interesting group in my opinion. You got the Zealots, a revolutionary group opposed to Roman rule, combining religious zeal with political activism, based in Judea, particularly during the Jewish-Roman wars. And then you've got the Samaritans, a distinct group that followed a version of the Torah and worship on Mount Gerizim rather than in Jerusalem. And they were in central Samaria and modern day West Bank. And I think the last three, I believe, have a less political induced reason for worship and carrying out tradition than the Pharisees and Sadducees, at least as how the Pharisees and Sadducees were presented in the New Testament. I can't say that they're a realer or more, I'm not going to say that, but I think that they were less politically driven and more of, even though the Zealots, they had political activism, I don't think any of the Essenes, Zealots, or Samaritans were interested in control and rule, and I think Pharisees and Sadducees may have, at least biblically in the New Testament, had more of an aim at that. So, those are the sects. The oldest continuous sect is the Samaritans. They're considered the closest to an ancient Israelite sect that still exists today. They trace their lineage to the northern kingdom of Israel, which is Samaria, and have maintained distinct religious practices, including the worship of God on Mount Gerizim. Their population remains small, residing in modern Israel and the West Bank. So the ancient Israelites emerged in the region of Canaan. They're the foundation of Jewish history and identity. And over time, their practices evolved into various sects, with the earliest divisions arising during the Second Temple period. The modern expressions of Judaism trace their roots back to these ancient beginnings. So a real, interesting history of these people. They have such a colored and dynamic history. They've been all over the globe. They face so many, persecutions and obstacles. They've made so much of themselves, and whether you view them in a positive or negative light, you have to commend them, in my opinion, for lasting the test of time and being successful, and for showing generational aptitude as far as generational wealth and building themselves into cornerstones of society. And no matter how you feel about them, man, they have to be at least admired by their own if you don't admire them yourself. So salute to them. There are, other small tidbits in my summary, but I believe that, I believe I kind of covered everything. There's no real credible evidence to support the claim that Jewish people control things like the music industry or, whatever. But there are examples that they've had a lot of influence over a lot of things, and once again, they kind of made the best out of the situation that they were placed in a lot of times. And they also have to hold some accountability for how some people view them today. And, it kind of is what it is. And I believe with people like Kanye and this UFC fighter guy, the Mitchell guy, I think that their views on Hitler, because Hitler and the Jews are always going to coincide. And I think that when you say certain things, whether in a positive light about Hitler, you are automatically um, showing a form of anti-Semitism. And I think the main question and the main point of this video was, is that right? Is there a space to objectively talk about what Hitler did for his country, how his country benefited from his leadership? Was it necessary to totally do what he did to a whole race of people to get his country right? Is there ever a time where we say, hey, is what we've been told true and factual? Was it exasperated to have our sense of nationalism um, heightened because we were at war with this particular country? Is there ever going to be a time where we can just sit down and say, hey, humanity as a whole, its monarchs and upper leadership have sown such a web of deceit that it prompts us to feel these certain ways? Like, are we ever gonna clear this up? Is it ever gonna be a time where somebody can say, hey, I think Hitler was a good guy and not face backlash? Should they face backlash? And once again, this isn't a question of morality. This isn't, we're undecided on the moral, and this isn't that. Are the Jews the abused that became the abusers? Or was it all one big play that very few families that were in charge and that coexisted together no matter where they were from? Is it all one big play? Are we just witnessing, the ultimate play? And are we participants unknowingly, sitting in the audience but still participating in the production? So just a few things for you to think about. If you made it this far, salute to you. I appreciate you. Once again, if you ever need any insight in the Houston housing market, definitely leave a comment. And leave your comments, below, whether you good, bad, indifferent, however you feel. Let me know. Once again, it's your brother in business, King Rob, representing the Mac Global channel, where we discuss the things that move the needle in society, music, arts, culture, and commerce. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.